Welcome to the High Tech Podcast. This is episode 15. Check out what we have in store for you this week. Spaghetti! Spaghetti is literally the word that I couldn't get out of my head. Like, I was just like, spaghetti.
Spaghetti.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not even gonna ask.
Yeah.
I think there's a good way to do lecturing that engages people. I've been very engaged by certain lectures that I've looked at. There's also other lectures I have not been. Just like very like active learning practices. There's some I've been engaged by, and there's others that like, because it's not like they need a phone. They can have a laptop or
A phone,
else.
tablet,
Like,
laptop.
Again, and when you're in that space, they're gonna have something. It's an expectation now to come into education with some kind of technology tool.
We're back from outer space. We just walked up in here inside this place. I don't know. What's the lyrics?
Is this a real song?
Yeah, it's a song.
What
Have
song?
you ever watched Men in Black?
I mean, yeah, but I didn't pay attention to the music. I was more focused on Will Smith shooting aliens.
From outer space, whoo, I just walked in here to find you with that sad look on your face. There we go. I should have changed that stupid lock. I should have made you leave the key. If I would have known for just 1 second, you'd be back to bother me. Hey, it's Will and Josh here for another episode of High Tech. A little bit of the Jukebox Hero this week.
Now.
Yeah, this is the podcast. Oh, I recorded that.
Yeah.
It's happening.
No, yeah, it's a thing. You're starting your music career here today.
That's why I have podcast. Audacity. That's how this is amazing. I'm going to be a professional. A little bit of fun, a little bit of craziness this week as we try and figure things out. We were just waiting an extra 5 minutes to record as motorcycles rode up and down our city, which is always so much fun.
Yeah.
We wanted to start this week's episode off with a bit of a challenge for ourselves. We talked about maybe thinking about it further, and then we just said, you know what, crap, we're going to do it on the spot. It's
more fun if we pose this question without any time to prepare.
Yep. So the question is, and I'll be the first one to go, Josh, describe the other person in 4 words.
Oh, so I have to be the first one to describe. Darn it, I thought you were going to be to take.
Nope.
You, one of my words first is going to be rude. No, I'm just joking. No, okay, so I didn't think about this, right? Wait a few minutes, right? I think 4 words. If I had to describe Will. Okay, so here we go. A good one. Intentional. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to do some filler here if you're gonna be quiet the whole time.
Considerate.
Okay, intentional, considerate. Okay. Wow, thank you.
I'm building you up a bit.
Gotta bring me down. He's also setting the tone here because I'm thinking to myself,
forgetful. I am gonna add one in there.
Solid
intentional,
choice.
Considerate, and forgetful.
Solid.
I threw that. What am I at? Am I in 3?
That's the
Gosh,
yes,
this
sir.
is the longest thing I've ever had to do. Weapon.
Left turn. We went from like, dude, he's so intentional. Did you say considerate? He's so considerate. Forgetful. That's honest to God true, so that's fine.
Yeah, I mean that's
weapon.
a real thing.
Weapon.
Listen, you're like a living weapon to me, my friend. Okay,
you
can like, black belt in Taekwondo. You probably got 6 weapons on your person right now. I don't know.
I'm in my house. There's only a few in reach. They're not on my body.
There's still a few. We're recording a podcast, and there's still a few in reach. Do you know how many weapons are close to me? I have a pencil from my laptop. That is the closest thing I have to a weapon.
I was counting the 2 pens that I can see.
Oh, you're counting the 2 pens? Oh, well then I have a ton of weapons.
And the 2 knives.
I don't have knives. I have Sharpies and highlighters.
If you pulled a Sharpie on somebody. All right, so my 4 words for Josh. Josh definitely also gets some of those great lead words. So like, I can't ditto, but thoughtful. There we go. Thoughtful, right? Let's see. Josh would definitely also get like committed. Yeah, I think committed. Like I see that in your podcasting, how you like you use Patreon and stuff. You committed to doing this. You stay close to friends. So yeah, I think committed.
Okay. Oh, nice. Waiting for my bad one.
There you go. They don't have to be bad.
Not bad. They're just they're a fun friend knowing a friend.
Honest.
We know some of our faults, our honest faults.
Sleepy.
That is very true. I hate that that's the truth, but it is very
I cannot tell
very
you,
true.
podcast friends, how often I have been with Josh and watched him just kind of like in the middle of video games, movies.
It is
TV,
very true.
Just like
What
nod off a little bit.
one of my favorite stories, guys, this is a small addendum here. When I was in like high school or maybe college, we were playing Halo, and I fell asleep playing Halo, and my character just started running in circles and shooting at the ground. Like
That's perfect.
That's true story.
Gosh.
Spaghetti.
Spaghetti is literally the word that I couldn't get out of my head. Like I was just like spaghetti.
Spaghetti.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not even gonna ask.
Yeah. Well, so okay. See, I think this one requires some explanation.
Is there logic? Okay.
It's one of the few things I think you've ever like made for me food wise.
Okay.
But going back to college, like you made spaghetti and you loved it and it was delicious. But like we've had to go and do that a couple of times since then. So it's like it's one of those things like you made spaghetti for us like a couple of months back or something at your place. It's one of those things that like you started our friendship early on years and years ago making me spaghetti, and then today you still will make spaghetti.
That's good. That's
I think
good.
I turned that one around.
Yeah, you turned that one around. We'll edit out some of that empty space.
Probably
Maybe.
not.
Probably not. We'll see.
I don't like editing. It gets boring sometimes.
This is fine. This is what you guys get. We don't prepare. Welcome to the High Tech Podcast.
This is episode 1 again.
This is where I'm learning. Yeah. So let's get into our conversation after that.
Hopefully that was fairly engaging for you, because today we want to talk about student engagement.
Yeah.
This is a pretty big ticket item in, like the COVID time frame, as well as kind of online engagement, online classes. What does it mean to get the students quote unquote engaged? Active learning has been a big theory for probably the last 20 to 30 years in education. It's definitely, growing in popularity, but active learning would say that the students should not just be sitting there listening through an entire session, through an entire lecture, that they should have some activity in the process. Well, we start to try and measure that by saying that they're engaged. If we're doing active learning, then they are probably engaged. It's not true one of the other, but there's some relationship there. And so a lot of folks turn into technology for engagement to say, okay, it's not just I want the students to raise their hands and answer a question. I want them to do a quick poll. I want them to respond to a question I write on the board. Like, these are engagement practices that don't need technology, but that start to set the groundwork for what we can do in the technology, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's this idea, and I got introduced to this a little through my education, but then more as a theory when I got into the space I'm in. But yeah, it's like this idea that you need to engage the students. Like it's not enough just to dump information on them. We're not necessarily brains on sticks that absorb whatever we're told.
Wait, we're not?
No, have you looked at the world? That's not what happened.
I've met a few brains that look like they're just sitting on sticks, but that's between you and me. Now, one of the things that student engagement does kind of assume is it's not the resource dumping, so you're not just going to lecture. We actually have a whole episode planned on lectures. Don't get us wrong there. We find value in lecture. Neither Josh nor I will sit here and throw a stone at that glass house, but when you are spending 3 hours with the students, a 3-hour class, and all you're doing to them is talking, that's a resource dump. And it's a lot of resources. When you're in an online course and you have hundreds of pages of stuff and 2 hours of videos in a week, that's a resource dump. And so we're saying that content may be what you need to give them, but engaging them throughout that 2 hours or 3 hours of time, throughout the video, throughout the reading, that is the beneficial practice. It's a point for them to stop, reflect on what they've already learned or what you've already told them, maybe start to already think about how it impacts their life, think about how they could change their perspective, etc., etc.
Yeah, the point isn't getting them to engage, right, with the content, the ideas, what they're learning. It's giving them time to process and engage with that. And that's why, you and I said this, you said it earlier. It's the, like, often where this conversation goes with active learning or student engagement, I feel like is like a lecture gets the bad rap. And we're not in a lecture episode, we're going to talk about it, but I will make the comment that, like, I think there's a good way to do lecturing that engages people. I've been very engaged by certain lectures that I've looked at. There's also other lectures I have not been. Just like very like active learning practices. There's some I've been engaged by, and there's others that, like, I just filled in something random because I wasn't that brought in by it. There's certain ways that you do this. Yeah.
I was in a keynote session just this morning at a conference where the keynote speaker used polls for probably the first 5 minutes or so of her presentation. And that was engaging us as an audience. And that wasn't the only thing she did to engage us, because she continued to use relevant media. She continued to use topics that engaged us as an audience, and she was aware of COVID-19, so she talked about how things might be different from what we previously experienced because of what's happened during COVID-19 with the quarantines, etc. That's engagement, and there is no like one right way to do it. The value, I think, in student engagement is doing it with frequency, not every other minute, not every 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be that rote, but once in a session, once in a lecture is too few. Only doing one, knowledge check after 300 pages of reading, too few, right? And if you look at any modern textbook, they have those knowledge checks in there. There's almost always a question in the margin, or there's questions at the end of the chapter that they should reflect on for what they just read. All of those are engagement practices. The thing that we would maybe suggest as a result of this episode is to use them more frequently and maybe use them more intentionally, right? Like if you have a textbook that has those knowledge checks in there, maybe make sure the students actually do them. Have them submit them as like an assignment or something like that. Or maybe have them, read 20 pages by Monday and answer a couple questions, read the next 20 pages by Wednesday, a couple questions, and then the last 20 pages by Friday, a couple questions, so that they don't have to do the whole 60-page chapter at one sitting, which they might be tempted to do if we don't make some sort of engagement practice. I don't think it's ever effective to just read 60 pages at once. You're not going to retain the information. It's not going to stay with you unless you have a didactic memory.
Maybe you will. Some of us.
Hey,
obviously
one of
retain.
your words for me wasn't genius, so clearly.
Yeah, that's clearly I'm being. That's not true. I would not remember 60 pages. I probably wouldn't even remember 20. But no, I mean, I think there's no perfect. I think some people try to argue like a perfect science to this, or even like to your comment, or even maybe I'd give a little pushback too. Is like there's like yes, I think there should probably be more than one like way you're engaging your student during the piece, but I think it's taking moments to think through what you're teaching and how to get the students to engage with it. Like where might be topics or things that you're going over that are going to be hard for students to understand, or it's going to be hard for them to apply this, like to think through how this is going to apply to their situation, or to if you're training them towards something, like what if you're teaching a very practical thing, like how is that going to, and finding a place that you can pause and start to engage with them to process through that, to get information, to work through that with them. Like I think it's just like carefully thinking through like where are things going to overload them? Where do we need to engage with them so that they can work through this better,
right.
Or we can work with them to understand something better.
And it might be even helpful if you're trying to think this through, you listener, you our friend, like through your own curriculum. What are some examples of how you could do this? Right. So we've said basics like put in quizzes, but it doesn't have to be a 10 question or 20 question quiz. My point would be more like a knowledge check, using that language. Like ask them a question or two about the readings as they're going. Put out some polls about people's opinions on the topic for the week. Another practice, if we go back to one of my former colleagues, one of Josh's former colleagues, I guess now he's in a different department. Like the muddiest point, very popular in education, like making sure that the students kind of dictate, all right, from today's class, like what was difficult, what did they not understand, what did they understand. So the muddiest point is something where they dictate like, oh, today I really, we talked about, I don't know, the New Deal, FDR's New Deal, but I just don't quite get how it applied to American society. Great, that's Amadia's point. You've got some feedback from the student. You can use that. And we've done an episode in the past about formative and summative assessment.
Yeah.
Anything you could imagine under formative is what we're advocating for here in engagement.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's to your point, like there's some examples. Those were some good examples of what can be thrown in. It looks different in different places. Like in an online environment, it might be like we often throw stuff like that into a discussion for students to discuss with each other. I think even having like, simple stuff like journal responses and things where they have to process and write, working through that in an online space can totally make sense. Actual knowledge check quizzes work too in those spaces, although I try to avoid, like I use those, but maybe try to avoid some of them. So you're not just giving them random quizzes all the time about the stuff that they're doing, but like asking them questions, trying to engage with them in that way. And I think in a physical classroom, like it's a similar concept. It's like, it's just pausing to work through some of those things. Even, we've shown tools where you can poll and things, like asking them what are things you didn't understand and coming back the next class and engaging that and having discussions about it. Like there's ways to break up. And I often use like texture, a course, or texture, that space to like give different ways that you're working through processing and engaging things with students.
Yeah.
It's thinking through those. And yeah, it's somewhat, I think too, like, I think when people talk about this idea, they act like they have it all figured out. We have all these different theories of how things work. And I think some of it too is just experimenting with what works and what doesn't. And it's okay to do that. Some things are not going to work. And that's totally fine.
And actually, now that I think about it, we're trying to give some examples, another resource besides our rambling, I think this is a really great one for higher education, is James Lang's Small Teaching. It's not some end-all be-all Bible of higher education, but small teaching is this principle that I could make big changes in my classroom by doing small things. And some of those small things might just be engagement practices. He suggests one called interleaving. Interleaving is a practice where I might bring up a concept I've talked about in past episodes, in past classes that's relevant slightly today. So you might, in lesson 1, introduce the idea of, active learning. And then in lesson 15, you're talking about something different. Well, let's bring active learning back up again. Even some of those things can be engagement practices because it's changing the pace of the learning and changing the pace of the teaching. So the students have to kind of think of things in a new light, before you move on to your new context. So check out James Lang's Small Teaching if you're really looking for ways that you could bring some engagement in your classroom without changing too much, without trying too much. You don't have to do big things or put a quiz every 5 seconds or every 5 minutes of your class. Like, you can do something simple and just do it once a class, and that could improve your engagement practices.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, some of this is feeling a little far from us, and I think that that's part of like this being a highly conceptual thing. To help us out, I think it's time to bring things a little more near to us, right? If they're too far, we just can't see them. So let's focus on a tool like Nearpod that can help us ground ourselves in the conversation.
The Illingworth transition.
Sometimes I'm like really excited about them. Sometimes I'm just like, I got to make this work.
Yeah. I think you're doing great. You're doing great, man.
Thanks.
Yeah. Solid work.
That's my 5th word, right? Transitions.
Transitions. Yes.
My 5th word.
That's your 5th word. It is now transitions. I might bump that up above living weapon or weapon or whatever we did. Transitions. Sorry, unless you want weapon to be higher. Weapon's higher. Never mind.
There we go. Nearpod is for lack of a better term, either an audience response system or a student response system. The idea behind Nearpod is that you can put all of your normal slides into it, right? So like if you're a slides-based teacher, you like to have, either notes on your slides, or if you show diagrams, graphs, whatever, you can import those into Nearpod, and then you can intersperse interactions into your PowerPoint presentation. So this is something that we actually have kind of talked about in the context of like online hybrid classes comparing to face-to-face. Like, one of the things that's really tricky with these engagement practices is if you're used to just being able to, like, in the middle of class saying, hey, so I'm going to stop real quick. What do y'all think about what I was just talking about? Like, that's really easy to do, right? But if you're talking online or hybrid, or if you're using a tool like Nearpod, you typically have to have that question prepared. You have to have thought like, oh, I'm going to go into class today and I want to ask them a question about FDR's New Deal. You can't, it's not necessarily easy to just do those questions on the fly. Some of these tools, Nearpod does have one where you can kind of write up a couple of specific types, but Nearpod as a tool will let you on your device put together your PowerPoint presentation with interactions and present it to the students, and they log in on their own devices using a code, and they see their slides on their devices. So that as you go to a question, for instance, they all see that question on their devices, and then they can respond to it. So the cool thing, that's kind of like Poll Everywhere. It's kind of like a bunch of other tools out there that, clickers, etc. That like, oh, I want the students to do something when I ask a question. The cool thing with Nearpod, though, is it's got a big library of things you can do. So you can do quizzes. Great. Easy. You can kind of like ABCD, correct answer, a couple of questions in a row. You can do polling. So there's no correct answer. You can do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, response types. You can do open-ended, so the students can just type in whatever they want to say. You can do a collaborate board, really cool kind of post-it note structure where everybody can put up a couple of words or they can put up pictures. You can do something called a drawing activity. So the draw it is where the students either you put up an image and they draw on it, or you can put up a whiteboard and they have to draw something, either to demonstrate an idea you're talking about or, highlight an image so they can prove they understand something like, say, anatomy. You could put, pictures of some bones on. They have to identify the femur, for instance. They have to draw on it or highlight it. You can put in YouTube videos. You can put in virtual field trips. There's a lot of stuff, frankly. I mean, cool. I know there's more than even that. But what that means is to build your lecture, to build your class session, you have to be thinking about what those engagements are and how you want to use them.
Yeah.
You can do a quick poll on the fly. You can do a quick open-ended question on the fly. But if you wanted to do that drawing activity, you have to set that up before class. You have to know when you'd want the students to do that. And so it takes a lot of critical thinking to imagine in the flow of your lecture, when would I want the students to be engaged? When would I want them to do something with me? Nearpod makes it very easy to do it, which is great, and I love the tool. I've been using it probably since 2015. I've used it for free for a while. I've used it, of course, in a paid context most recently. They really are responsive to kind of those teachers' needs, and they provide a lot of features and functionality at a freemium level. Really good tool. It's got some size limits, right? You can have as many Nearpods as you want, but they're limited to like 5 megabytes. Size.
Yeah, there's some like size limits on it, and some of the, I think, like bringing them into some of the lessons and things that Nearpod can also do. There's like student limits on amount of things that they can see or something like that, if I remember correctly, because we have people using it for free, and that they ran into that at one point. There was like a student limit.
There's a limit on a session.
Yes,
you can only have 40 or 50 students in a session. Live, which can be a big setback for folks. Which,
understandably, I mean, they're a large tool. They do provide a lot of resources for education to like get licenses and things like that. It's right. I don't blame them for that. They are a tool, a large ed tech tool. Yeah, they're trying to make money. So, I mean, Will has more experience with Nearpod than I do because we haven't had a ton of uses for it since I've been at my institution. It's on my list of things to like review and approve for certain things, but I'm not getting paid money for it, so I'm not gonna be able to use it the way I would love to use it. But I do really like this idea of like with Nearpod, it's a great tool for this idea of this kind of virtual interaction being placed in the midst of already the PowerPoint slides of the things that you're already doing. And again, like it's a cool tool. Trying to try that out, I think it just takes some planning to figure out where would you want these things in, where would you want these questions to be in, where would you want the polls to be thrown into. And also, I would just encourage you when you're using the tool to think about why you want those there. Like what is it that you're going to get out of that? What engagement? Because a Nearpod would be a tool that I would put in a category that I've seen educators use before because it's there.
Sure.
And they don't think through like why they're using it. They're just like, oh, it's a cool it's one of the popular ed tech tools right now. And I'm tired of using Kahoot, so I'm going to use Nearpod.
You said that word.
Oh, sorry. I know you hate the music, man. It's fine.
She drives me nuts. One of the like, to your point there, Josh, one of my first educators using it at my current institution actually blew me away with her use of it, because she almost only used open-ended questions, right? She didn't use a lot of the different question types, but when she used an open-ended question, she used it to engage the students directly. So they would put up a question, who was the founder of psychology, or who's considered to be the founding father of psychology, right? And it's somebody William, or somebody Williams, James William, I don't know. But the students would then all put in the name that they think it is, and then she would wait for all the responses to come in. She would look at them all, and then she'd go, okay, Jonathan, who do you think it is? She knew who Jonathan thinks it is, right? But she would call on Jonathan and say, can you tell me right now who you think it is? William Taft. That's a president. Wrong. Why did you think it was William Taft? And she wouldn't just like take the answer, which was already wrong in the Nearpod, and drop it, right? She would engage them on that question.
Yeah, and why they thought it. That's cool.
And then if somebody like floundered with a question or whatever, she'd be like, all right, that's cool, John. Why don't you turn to Anthony and ask him to help you? And she would make the students start to interact with one another, and she'd use their names to get them engaged, which it was always to me like a stellar example. She wasn't using these virtual field trips, drawings, quizzes, polls, all of it, right? She used open-ended questions, but how she used them directly engaged the students every time. And I found it to be pretty expert.
I was going to say, think of the application there. Like that's a good why. Like there was clear thought behind what was going to happen there. Like imagine, I could see that definitely being in a great space of like, because I there's always this situation when you ask questions in class, there's like the two people that always answer, and like, I think like Nearpod's a good example of like an interactive tool that can change a little bit of that to say, okay, you know what, we're going to stop. I want you guys to answer all these, answer this open-ended question. And even beyond just like who is this, but like even processing a topic that you're talking about, or even like a deeper response of like, obviously I come from like a theological education background, like, trying to process an idea, with a question, and seeing their responses, asking students to explain why they posted that, why they put that up, and being able to kind of work through that. And that could be while you're doing it would be really cool.
That can be a big pairing of the tools, right? So you could do a quick poll, who thinks it's blah, 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 and then you could do an open-ended question, why?
Yeah.
And then off of the why, you can go back into your lecture. Like it's okay to integrate all of it together.
Yeah.
But I think that it's really
there
cool.
You've already had the students forced to process through the question so it's not going to feel as intrusive to like call on them to, you're not pulling the classic like old school teacher move where you're like, you weren't paying attention, I'm going to ask you what you thought and embarrass the crap out of you. Like,
right.
You've given them time to process, you give them time to interact, and then you can leverage that to start good conversation and engage with the content and keep moving on and lecturing and whatever else you need to do. And it's like, I think Nearpod provides a cool, seamless way to make that happen.
Exactly. That's it for me, because clickers, going back technologically, clickers were a physical device people had to buy and take into the classroom. So A, if they didn't buy them, you couldn't use them. B, if they didn't bring them with them that day, you couldn't use them. C, if their batteries ran out, you couldn't use them. Like, there's just layers upon layers that made clickers, though a good idea, ineffective. Yeah. Nearpod does rely on the students having a device, but I've been using it at my institution since January 2019, and I have not once since then had a single student go into any class. I've got over 35 users, right? So almost 35 faculty using this thing. Never once has a student not had a device that they could participate in the Nearpod. Because
it's not like they need a phone. They can have a laptop, or
a phone,
else
tablet, laptop.
Again, and when you're in that space, they're gonna have something. It's an expectation now to come into education.
It's always been a concern.
Technology tool.
If the kid walks in with a flip phone, right? They can't do the Nearpod that day. But we see, it's just not common. We haven't had it happen in over 2 years of using Nearpod.
And you can very easily set that expectation with students, too.
Right?
Right. I don't think it's crazy to expect that they bring in a device of some sort.
Some of our institutions already have that requirement. You have to have a working, laptop or computer that you can take with you.
Welcome to the 21st century, and I realize that there are some who struggle financially to get that, and that's where our institutions meet that gap. Absolutely, but I think it's okay to expect this in this tool. So anyway, I think Nearpod is definitely, I think it's a cool tool, and there's a reason it's out there in different places, and you have connections with people that are there in Nearpod, so you know some of the like genuine people behind it, and like they're good people with good intentions, and I think their tool has some really cool uses that I think you could definitely benefit from.
I've used it just at conferences and like doing like my own presentations, because it's nice. You do get a pretty detailed report after a session, so it's nice. Like if I were to go to a conference, for instance, and ask a question, or if I want to get people's contact information, right? So I could follow up with them. Like here, you scan this QR code to blah blah blah. Like nope. If you were in my Nearpod to see the notes and engage with the interactions I planned, I just could have had you put your email in at the first step. And I already have it if you want to get that kind of connection. Something else that's auxiliary to this I forgot to mention, but I think is really important about Nearpod as a function. Because it's on the student's device, it's immediate to them. They know their device. They know how to use their Android or their iPhone. They know how to use their laptop or their tablet. And so it really makes that engagement practice personal, right? They can take notes on their device however they want to. They're not like, they don't have to, if you say you can't use it a laptop in my class or something, they have to take paper notes. What if they suck at handwriting? Or they I physically, to this day, if I handwrite too long, my hand cramps. I'm not good at handwriting. It's not something I've ever liked doing. But you want me to type 1,000 words? No problem. My fingers will dance across the keys.
And you can I'm a similar way, and I've had professors almost feel like I'm being shamed for being that way. It's like, this was invented for a reason, okay? Like
we made computers to help.
I understand you think this is something I should be better at, but like I also think you should be better at clicking around on the computer. So let's just agree to disagree and just let me take notes digitally. Thank you very much. So
Nearpod puts it on their device, makes it easier to use. We've had really good response from like students with disabilities. Frankly, like it's not a perfectly accessible tool, but because it's on their device, they can use their own softwares and stuff like that to make up for the difference.
Yeah.
And that's really important. We've had students with international needs, like, either second language or just a distance, stuff like that. And they've found that it's really helpful because it's on their device. And again, they can translate easier, or they can use it. And so I don't want to try and make this up, but I am saying that all that really plays into engagement, because the more the students feel comfortable in the learning environment, the more that they can directly communicate with you, the more that you've got materials planned to engage them, the more engaging it is. If they can, international student, I'm not saying that's exactly student engagement, but frankly, if they can read your content better because they can use their translator on their phone while they're going with the Nearpod, they're better engaged. They would not have been as engaged in your class if they were not understanding what you were writing or saying. And so I think it's really important that we consider kind of all of the benefits of these tools and how they can improve student engagement with our classrooms.
And remind me, Will, Nearpod, because I forget this, it's been a little bit since I looked at the back end of it. Like Nearpod does provide like reports and things on engagement as well. So you're kind of getting information as an instructor on how engagement was going, who engaged with what quiet,
There's like an overall percentage, and then it breaks it down by every activity in the session.
Yeah. So it gives you some information, which can be helpful. Again, that's a way a technology can enhance and kind of transform the experience a bit, where you're getting some information that you wouldn't necessarily get all the time from class. Like I feel like we have a feeling of how we think students are engaging, and sometimes you get information that says, oh, well, that's not quite the way it was. And Nearpod does, I think, a good job of providing a way for that to happen.
That's one of my favorite assumptions to address. My students aren't engaged, or my students are engaged. When a faculty member says that to me, I mean, I almost always want to ask right back, how do you know? Well, I'm in class and they're looking. I can see their body language. I can see that you're not a supercomputer. I know you can't mentally process 20 to 50 students worth of information and track that accurately to create a participation grade on it. Like, I've never felt that was fair. When I was a student, I didn't like participation grades. Yeah. As a master's student, as an educator, as an instructional designer, I don't think that's fair to base your participation grade on your visual perception of people's quote unquote engagement in your classroom.
Yeah.
Now, You can very quickly lean hard to the other side and start tracking everything. But my point might be Nearpod offers you a pretty good middle road. If they log in, that's already a step of engagement, right? If they don't even log into the Nearpod, you know they didn't see your slides. They didn't do your interactions. If they're logged in, did they do all of your interactions? Great. They at least were there doing something. If they did everything, did they do it well? So did they get answers correct? Did they try? Okay, like you now have a lot more layers of like feedback that I will be blatant. You did not have when you were just reading body language. Like that's not a sufficient measure for engagement.
Yeah, I think that's where a tool like this can be helpful. And again, it's not the end all. Like it's not doing it perfectly. But I encourage checking it out. You know, I think to your comment about small teaching earlier, like there's Nearpod's a tool that you could definitely like upload some slides, try a question, start small, and just change it up. I think it gives you a different way to engage with the tool. So that said, guys, thank you again for joining us for another week of the High Tech Podcast, where we have awkward lead questions now and great conversations. So I hope this was beneficial. Check out the tool, check out the resources we'll provide. We're looking forward to just appreciate you guys listening to us talk through our meanderings as we think about how we harness tech well in a physical, digital classroom, wherever you may be teaching, as we think through and just try to work through this together. So appreciate it, guys, and see you next time.
See ya.